I confessed my darkest secret to my fiancé before our wedding. He disappeared, and at Thanksgiving my family blamed him until I finally told the truth. Hey everyone. Before we kick off today's video, I've got a favor to ask. We've noticed our channel isn't getting as much love lately, and subscribing is one of the easiest ways you can help us out. It's quick, free, and it means we can keep bringing you awesome content. Your support really means a lot, so let's work together to keep this channel growing. Thanks a bunch. Now, let's dive into the video. So, about a week ago, this whole thing went down, and since then, I haven't heard a peep from Greg, not his real name, by the way. I've been doing everything to track him down, texting, calling, even showing up at his apartment and his sister's place. But nope, nada. Nobody seems to know where he is, or at least that's what they're saying. Except for his brother, who apparently didn't get the message to keep me in the dark, and he just straight up said Greg doesn't want to talk to me. Ouch. Let me back it up a bit so you know how we got here. Greg and I met 3 years ago at a church event. Yeah, I realize religion isn't Reddit's favorite topic, but that's where it all started. My history with guys isn't great, so I usually avoid chatting them up unless absolutely necessary. But there was Greg, talking to this group about a book I'd just finished reading, and I found myself sticking around to listen. After his talk, I asked him some questions about the book, and he answered every one of them, which was pretty impressive. The more we talked, the more I liked him. This was the first time I'd felt something for a guy since high school, which was a big deal for me because my past with relationships was pretty rough. After high school, I got mixed up with some bad people, fell into drugs, and things went downhill fast. My family tried helping me, but they finally had enough after I stole a lot of money for my heroin habit. They kicked me out, and I honestly can't blame them. I bounced around, crashing at different friends' places until I wore out my welcome there too. I ended up homeless for a bit, actually living on a park bench for a few days. Desperate, I started stripping and doing private dances. One thing led to another, and I was basically exchanging sex for money. Looking back, it's all a blur because I was constantly either high or hustling to get high. I was deep into that lifestyle for a few years until I overdosed on my 23rd birthday. I'd OD'd before, but this time I stopped breathing. Paramedics saved my life, bringing me back with CPR. I ended up in the ICU on a ventilator for 3 days. That's where I met this preacher who visited patients. He talked to me about finding a higher purpose in life. Honestly, I don't know if it was him, or just hitting rock bottom, or something else, but I decided to turn my life around. I asked for help getting clean, and I've stayed off drugs ever since. It wasn't easy, but day by day, life got better. I got a job, reconnected with my family, and then I met Greg. I'd never been in love, not even in high school, but after just a few dates with Greg, I was head over heels. On our 1-year anniversary, he proposed, saying we'd get married in a year. I was over the moon. Planning the wedding with my parents was amazing, they even wanted to pay for everything. One day when we were chatting about the wedding, my parents asked if Greg knew about my past, meaning the drugs. They didn't really know the full extent of what I'd done either. Mom thought I should just keep quiet since I was a different person now, but Dad reasoned that even though I'd changed, my past was still part of who I am. He said if Greg really loved me, he'd understand, and it was better than him finding out some other way and seeing it as a lie. That made sense, so last weekend, I gathered all my courage to come clean. So, I finally gathered up the courage to spill all my secrets to him, stuff that even my parents don't know. At first, he thought I was kidding, but when I made it clear I was serious, he got really quiet. He said he appreciated my honesty but needed time to think things over. It's been a week since then, and I've only texted him a couple of times just to say I love him and to check if he's okay. But he hasn't replied, and I'm feeling stuck. I'm at a loss because he's been my go-to person. Whenever I was down, he cheered me up, and he's always made me laugh. The thought of hurting him is just the worst because I really care about him. I got out of a rough patch from 6 years ago, moving to a different city and state, and I've stayed away from any connections to my past life. I'm hoping someone can help me figure out what to do next because I love him so much and want to fix this. Update, we ended up taking a short emotional break, which we both agreed on. We spent the whole afternoon at my place, just talking. Honestly, it was super hard, I cried a ton, more than I ever have. But we're still together, just not engaged anymore, which was his idea. It was touching that he opened up about his past, too, even though he didn't have to. I'm not sure if this means much to anyone, but your encouragement has been a huge help for me. Update 1. So, my original post title was way off because he did reach out, and we spent a few hours talking on Sunday. He didn't ghost me, it was just a mix-up. His brother apologized for not handling things well when I called, and the rest of his family didn't know what was going on because he told them to only contact him for emergencies. So, the whole ghosting thing was more about miscommunication and my own impatience. We both said sorry for that and moved on. We met at church. I got there first and sat in our usual spot. He arrived just as the service started, and we gave each other a quick smile, but inside I was a wreck. After the service, while chatting with his brother, he slipped away to talk to other people. I suspect it was planned, but anyway, he came back and asked how I was. I almost broke down but managed to keep it together. I told him I was ready to talk, hoping to get everything out in the open. He wanted to chat somewhere private, and I suggested my place so I wouldn't have to drive afterward. He came over, and I asked straight up if he was going to leave me, tears streaming down my face. His response gave me a lot of hope, which I didn't expect at all. So, there I was, chatting with him about that crazy day and how much I was willing to put up with. Honestly, that last part threw me for a loop. But I was just so relieved that he didn't say yes to whatever big question I feared, that I practically melted into my chair. I told him I was ready to do whatever it took to make things work. He then said he needed two things from me: honesty and patience. He started by apologizing for not being a better man. Can you believe it? Here was this amazing guy, and I'd been less than truthful with him, dropping what I imagine is the worst bombshell you could tell a future partner. Yet he was the one apologizing. I had to hug him and tell him to stop apologizing. We held each other while I cried for a bit, then I pulled myself together to hear him out. He confessed that he had a tough week, dealing with his own insecurities, jealousies, and prejudices. He realized that he was more possessive and jealous than he thought. He didn't need to go into detail, but let's just say it was deeply personal stuff. Then he asked if I was up for some tough questions and personal comments. Again, I was ready to do whatever it took, so I agreed. He asked me all sorts of questions, like if I used protection every time, whether I'd been with anyone in our city, how many people I'd slept with, and if I'd been tested for STDs. There were tough ones about drugs, like when I last took them, and if I felt the urge to use again. He even asked about stealing, like how much money I stole, if I paid it back, and how I'd guarantee it wouldn't happen again. Answering these questions took hours because I needed breaks to gather myself. I answered as honestly as I could. He kept saying I didn't have to answer if I didn't want to and apologized for asking, but he needed to know to move forward. After that, he laid out his worries and asked if I wanted to work through them with him, saying he'd understand if I didn't. But I told him I was here for it. His concerns? First, he was worried I might steal from him or his family if things got tough, especially since they own a business. They're not rich, but comfortable, and I get why he'd worry. Second, he's scared of the whole once a junkie, always a junkie thing. He fears he wouldn't be strong enough if I went back to that lifestyle. Lastly, he's afraid sex might become an issue. He's had intrusive thoughts about how I've been with many people and done many things, worried that nothing would feel special. He feared he'd become bitter, thinking our sex life was just for him, which would kill his desire. I listened and answered as best as I could, knowing some things are hard to guarantee. But I got where he was coming from and told him I understood. I kinda had a feeling this might come up since we spent a bunch of hours talking about it. We even had to take some breaks to keep our emotions in check. He really went through every feeling possible, but I knew I had to let him do that if we were going to make things work. He told me he wanted to stay and try to make it work because he really loved me. Hearing that made my heart skip a beat and, yeah, I cried again. You'd think I'd be tougher after everything I've been through, but I'm not. Then he said he didn't think we could go through with the wedding as planned and wanted to end our engagement but still keep dating exclusively for a bit. He said he believed me and felt he knew me, but he wanted to take a fresh look at things. That's where the feeling like he didn't really know me came in. I went to take off my ring and give it back, and for the first time, he broke down and cried. He asked me to put it back on, saying he just wanted to postpone the wedding, not end the engagement. I told him I was cool with whatever he needed. We decided we'd just tell people we're postponing because of scheduling conflicts and that we'd announce a new date later. As for telling the family, he planned to say he was stressed at work and there was a misunderstanding about his time off. I said I'd go along with whatever he thought was best. He didn't want anyone else knowing about my past except our minister, since we're starting couples counseling. We both agreed to this. Now, about my family, here's where we hit a snag. He assumed they knew everything, but I said they only knew about the drugs and stealing. He felt my parents should know since they're paying for the wedding and it might cause issues canceling things. He didn't want them thinking it was just because of my past drug use, but he'd go with whatever I decided. I really didn't want to tell them about the stripping and prostitution because that's a whole new level of hurt, and they've been so great since I came back. In the end, things turned out way better than I expected. Sure, he's got a less than perfect view of me now, and was pretty upset I waited so long to tell him, but I knew this was bound to happen. He assured me that once he gets over the shock, he'll try not to bring it up again. He's honestly a great guy, and I'm so lucky he's in my life. Edit: Wow, there are a lot of wild assumptions in my DMs. Just to clear things up, I didn't grow up in an abusive home or experience any kind of abuse as a child or teen. I had a loving family, and my actions broke their hearts. I'm so grateful they've welcomed me back with open arms. My parents are my heroes. My mom wasn't trying to cover up anything, just looking out for me. Also, during our talk, he made it clear I could dodge any question, and he asked multiple times if I wanted him to stop. Some of my answers really helped us bond because he genuinely listened. Update 2: Things are going great between us. Sure, we've got some issues, but nothing unexpected or unmanageable. I'm still super happy he's in my life. When we last talked, he suggested telling my parents the full story because he didn't want them thinking he was being too harsh about my past drug use. He said it wasn't a deal breaker, just a good idea to consider. After giving it more thought, I decided. So, there I was, feeling super uneasy about spilling the beans to my parents about a big part of my life. I truly believed they'd have my back, but I just didn't want to dive into the emotional roller coaster of actually telling them. I brought it up with my partner, and he was totally understanding. He promised to keep it under wraps for my folks. Eventually, I just went ahead and told my parents that we were pushing back the wedding. I explained that after we talked, he felt like he needed more time to think things over. I thought it'd be easier if he wasn't there to explain everything because I didn't want him to feel cornered if things got tricky. My parents were bummed, sure, but they got it. Then, he even gave me money to return their deposits, but they insisted we keep it. I figured that was the end of it. Boy, was I wrong. Fast forward to Thanksgiving. He swung by after having lunch with his family. I couldn't join them because I had a late shift and needed to help my mom with dinner last minute. He showed up at my parents' place around 4 p.m. and we all sat down to eat at 5:30. Everyone was in good spirits, my parents, grandparents, cousins. Then my younger cousin, who's about 12, innocently asked when we were tying the knot. Cue the painfully awkward silence. My partner glanced at me, and eventually, he said, "Probably next summer." My grandma, completely out of the loop, thought she got the date wrong. My mom quickly jumped in, saying there were scheduling issues, hoping that'd be that. But no. Grandma started grilling us about what kind of conflicts, whether it was the church or the minister, and was all set to sort it out. This went on forever, and I could see my partner was so over it. He kept quiet, but he was visibly upset. Once everyone left around 8:30 p.m., we sat in the living room. I kept apologizing, sensing he was still tense. My parents came back in from saying their goodbyes. My dad apologized, saying our family can be a bit much sometimes. We laughed it off, but my mom didn't join in. Then she made things awkward again. She said Grandma was probably upset because she was stressed about Grandpa's health and whether he'd make it to our wedding. And here's where it all went south. She added it was silly to delay things over my partner's past drug issues that hadn't been a problem for years. My boyfriend just sat there, tense again. I was holding his hand, feeling terrible for him. My parents started arguing, and it was clear they'd discussed this after I initially told them. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt awful for Greg, caught in the middle of all this family drama. I told my parents we needed to talk and that it wasn't fair to blame Greg. He signaled me to stop, but I pushed on, saying it wasn't right. I finally told them that when they kicked me out, I had no home, no job, no education, nothing. I admitted to becoming an exotic dancer, though I couldn't bring myself to divulge everything. But they aren't clueless. So, here's how it all went down. My mom just let out this huge gasp and burst into tears right away, while my dad sat there completely shocked, trying to calm her. Mom was practically hysterical for a few minutes before she apologized to Greg, saying she had no idea and praised him for sticking with me despite everything. Not too sure how I feel about that, but I guess she meant well. The important thing was that she didn't blame him. My dad, trying to lighten the mood, welcomed Greg to the family by saying it was just another typical Thanksgiving. I asked Greg if he was cool with me having a chat with my parents and told him I'd catch up with him on Friday. After walking him out, we kissed goodnight. I told him how amazing he was, and he assured me he wouldn't have said anything to them anyway. I knew that, but I felt they needed to know the truth for things to get better. Back inside, I spent hours talking to my parents, and it was heartbreaking. My dad was crying openly, which I'd never seen before. He blamed himself, thinking he ruined my life by kicking me out. No matter what I said, I just couldn't comfort him, and my mom trying didn't help either. We all hit the sack eventually, but I woke up later to my mom freaking out and calling 911 because my dad was having chest pains. The ambulance guys said he was having a heart attack and whisked him off to a heart specialist hospital. Dad looked terrible, and I was terrified. I rang up Greg, and he came over pronto to drive mom and me to the hospital. They wouldn't let us see dad since they rushed him into surgery. The doctor explained that the ambulance probably saved his life, and there was a surgeon in there putting in stents and using some tool to clear a blood clot. We called our minister who showed up within half an hour. Dad's set to come home tomorrow, and he looked much better tonight, saying he felt just fine. Greg has been like a rock for us. When he went to grab food for us, my mom actually told me to hold on to him because the only man better than Greg she knew was my dad. I'm just so relieved my dad's going to be okay. Greg joked when he dropped me off that life's never boring with me around, and we both had a good laugh. I've got to help dad see that what he did wasn't his fault, it was tough love. He didn't just toss me out on a whim, it was after years of trying to get through to me. I talked to my minister about getting dad into therapy, and he said he'd suggest it to dad as his minister and could recommend another therapist if dad's up for it. Hopefully, this wraps things up. I know Greg's the love of my life, and I'm doing everything I can to show him how much he means to me and that I'd never betray his trust.